Welcome into today's conversation. Really excited about this one. I've got Chris Stonis from Sparkle Squad. He's joining us north of the border, but Sparkle Squad, his brand, it's growing like gangbusters here in the United States. We've collaborated on a placement, a whole lot more coming down the pipe as well. So, Chris, how's it going, man? How are you today?
It's going amazing. I'm having a great day. Better now that we get to sit and spend some time and talk. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Talking Sparkle Squad, talking origin story back in Canada as you referenced. Yeah, so it's great. Although it's real cold out here right now.
Yeah, I hear you. We've got about a foot of snow on the ground here as well, and what I really am, you've got such an awesome story, and I want to tee it up this way, and then just pass you the mic and let you roll. You are a founder of a franchise concept that has grown in Canada and the United States, but your path to get there is really unique. And there's lots of people who are on this phone call or on this conversation today who are listening in that maybe are thinking about franchising, and they come from a corporate world. They come from finance. Maybe they're a banker. Maybe they're an engineer. They don't have any transferable experience that would naturally lend them to franchising.
Mm-hmm.
You started your career in the music industry, man. And now here you are. You run a multinational franchise brand that does power wash window cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get there?
Well, that's a long story. If you don't mind the long version, I'll kind of take you back to how I got here. And then there's a couple things that you alluded to there that I think they are probably worth pulling on threads. So I was in the music industry before this. I was a sound engineer. That had been my sole focus as long as I can remember. Was I wanted to kind of be like a photographer for sound. I wanted to like capture moments with musicians, and I kind of made it my life's work to, at the time at least, do that and to see how far I could take it. And where I think ties into the transferable skills that you mentioned was the effort that it took to get to the top of that industry. So I was very fortunate to put in a lot of hours with a lot of great people and have a lot of great mentors. And I kind of made it to the kind of pinnacle of the industry. I was working for Bryan Adams, who's a famous Canadian, in his recording studio in Vancouver. And we were working on Grammy-winning records with the best artists of the time. And something interesting happened. So this was my early 20s. The only thing I knew was applying effort towards this goal. And once I reached the top, there was nowhere to apply my effort in the same way. It became like a job all of a sudden. Like before, there was this forward progression that was really, really rewarding. And it was kind of what fired me up. And now I was like, I still loved the job. Don't get me wrong. But I was lacking that like energy, that progression, that like passion to do more, to become better. And I worked for that studio for just over a year. And I kind of realized that I needed to do something that filled that bucket, that momentum bucket again. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I certainly never thought it would be washing windows. But I knew I had to extract myself from the situation to kind of find it. And so I, gave my notice, let everybody know that I was going to be leaving the studio and kind of getting out of the industry to try something different. And everyone in my life kind of thought I'd lost my mind, right? I'd made it. Like, what are you doing? Including my wife of 20 years, who married a successful audio engineer turned window cleaner. So it was a real moment in time. And when I left, I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I was looking for something that I could apply my drive to. And window cleaning just kind of showed up. I was walking home the day I quit the studio, actually, and I saw a high-rise window cleaner and just thought to myself, that's the opposite of a dark record. That's the opposite of what I'm leaving. Like, there's so much freedom, so much opportunity. And I started in the industry just as a way to pay the rent. There was no grand plans. There was no franchising. It was, I needed a job that I thought I would enjoy. And I did enjoy it. And the moment I realized that I really enjoyed the work, I kind of had this, well, if I enjoy the work, others will. Therefore, I can build a workforce. And then I started looking around, and it's amazing when you actually look around and you see the volume of glass in this world, and it all gets maintained. And so I thought, geez, there is like everywhere I look, I just saw opportunity. And so I spent about 6 years working for as many companies as I could in the industry. And I found that passion that I loved most about the music industry was a place to put my effort. I found that in window cleaning. And over time, obviously, you know, if you spend 20 years applying maximum effort, you continue to grow. And the cool thing about home services, and I'll wrap this story up, but the passion really was in the fact that I could get disproportionate output from my input, which meant the harder I tried, the better the return. And that's kind of been how I've approached this business from day one, is like, I'm just going to outwork everybody, and I'm going to try harder. I'm going to stay up later. I'm going to do more. And that's kind of what led to the Elite Window Cleaning and then Sparkle Squad. So huge parlay from one industry to the other. But what I loved most, and to circle back to your point, is it was a place to put my effort. And that was ended up being my passion. Like, my passion is hard work. And no matter what industry I was in, as long as I could fill that bucket, I was just as happy as a clam.
I love that idea of passion being hard work. And I'll tell you, I'm so glad you hit on that. In the seat of a consultant, all the time I hear, hey, I want to do something I'm passionate about. It's like, you know what, man? I don't know if I've got a golf franchise for you. If you want to be in an industry you're passionate about, you need to go to the local country club. You can be a golf starter, and then you could be around an industry that you're passionate about. But for you, it's that passion of being, I'm just going to outgrind everybody I come across and put myself in a position where that matters. I had a similar experience, Chris, where growing up, always loved sports, always thought that was the industry that I was going to work in. And so I did, and worked for Sports Illustrated and worked for the Indianapolis Colts, and did some marketing work with the NFL. All really cool stuff. But there was a moment where the shine on that kind of wore off a little bit, where it was still just a job. And for me, there was one morning where I was doing a pregame stuff in December at an Indianapolis Colts game, and I was setting up inflatables for a pregame fest at 5 a.m. And at that moment, I'm really thankful for the opportunity, but I really had that moment where I said, it's cool that this is my office right now, but this is a Sunday morning. Is this what I want to be doing? And I looked around and I looked at the people who were a career move or 2 or 3 ahead of me, and I looked at their lifestyle. I looked at what they were doing on a day in and day out basis. I said, I don't think this is for me. And I'm still just as passionate about football, but that didn't mean I needed to make a career out of it. I'd be curious on your end. When did the allure or the shine or sparkle, pun intended, of the music industry start to wear off on you?
It was, I think it was when I realized, like, dude, you could have just swapped music for football there and said my exact story. It was the late nights. You're working on a band's clock. And I mean, we were so fortunate. Like, we got to work with people I'd idolized since childhood, like AC/DC. Recording an AC/DC record for me was like, wow. I remember like being awesome. A really young kid and listening to that in like my dad's truck, and thinking back, for me, it was very similar. It was the late nights. It was the looking up the ladder and seeing what the next rung looked like. And I was kind of in the room with those engineers that you would hear of and people would know, and their lifestyle just wasn't the one that I wanted. And so it was a hard decision. I would say it was the best decision, the best singular decision that I ever made, was to be really honest with myself about what I wanted in the future from an experience, not from an accolade, because it felt real good. Don't get me wrong. Like, going to those parties and like, you know, award ceremonies, and you're in the industry, and it felt super good. I'm sure similar to working with the NFL, but it felt good from like an outward perspective. And for me, it was like, I just wanted to do something that I could be mine. I could feel it. I was raised by entrepreneurs. And when I look across our franchise owners, I actually see a common thread of people who were raised in entrepreneurial households. And for me, growing up, there was a direct line between effort and food on the table. And I think that that's kind of interesting when I look back at myself about that effort piece that I keep circling back to. My parents weren't successful entrepreneurs, but geez, did I ever know when we went on a trip, exactly what job led to that. There wasn't like some confusing middle place that my parents went for 9 hours. It was, we were a family business and we all worked for, putting food on the table. So I think for me, it was just like you said, looking one rung up and going, geez, that's not really any better than the rung that I'm on today. And that's going to take 5 years. So that's going to put me 10 years in the future. Do I really want to spend the next 10 years doing the same thing?
Well, it's for me, it was stepping out of sports. For you, it was stepping out of music. You talk with people who are interested in franchising all the time. I talk with people who are interested in franchising all the time. And I'm talking to them franchise, there's Sparkle Squad. Maybe there's a fencing franchise or a health and wellness franchise. And we don't do a ton of food, but maybe sometimes food. And there's someone who's maybe coming out of corporate finance, or maybe someone who's worked, I'm in Cincinnati, so they've worked for Procter and Gamble for their entire career. And they're looking at me and they're saying, look, I've been in purchasing or research and development for beauty care products. And you want me to start a lawn care franchise?
Right.
How does that correlate? But I think what we oftentimes see is you're prepared for those moments in those environments. And it's less about the product or the service that you're selling and more about the intangible skill set that you're picking up along the way. I'd be curious from your end, when you're talking to candidates and what you've learned in your own experience, how do some of these unexpected training grounds of corporate America or just different industries prepare entrepreneurs in ways that maybe they wouldn't think they were being prepared to be a business owner?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna think with my mouth here, because there's so many places that I could go. But when I think about it, and I think about when I'm meeting a potential owner, right at the kind of end of the process, and we're getting to that decision-making time really, and we spend an hour together. There's two things that I do. Number one is I go in totally blind. I don't want to know more than their name or territory, because I want to get to know them for myself. I don't want somebody's notes. I don't want any of that muddying up my experience. And what I always find that is so interesting is they could have a sales background, or they could have a marketing background, or they could have finance background. They've come from a corporate America, and they're in one of those silos. And most of their experience is in a singular silo. Very rarely do you see somebody with the full breadth of knowledge that it takes to understand everything that you need to run a business. But the one thing that all of the candidates that I leave those calls feeling the connection with, is the people that understand that how they got to where they are in their career is through relationships, through people. Like, everybody works, no matter what silo you're in, you can draw on those like people you lean on, or how you communicate. Like, entrepreneurs are communicators, they're enthusiastic people. And no matter where you put an entrepreneur in the world, whether it's in corporate America, pumping gas at, the corner down the road, this future entrepreneur is going to be building relationships, and they're a communicator. And that's, I think, the common thread that I find is probably the single most valuable thing, is to be able to build relationships. And it doesn't matter your background, because, that's what we do to get where we are in the world, is we build relationships. The reason that you and I are having this call today is through a series of relationships that each of us could trace back to childhood. Like, there's just an infinite number of dominoes that have to fall. And so I encourage people, when they're looking at entrepreneurship and considering a Sparkle Squad, or really anything, is take a stock of your emotional capital, and like really understand how you got to where you are today, and what relationships you built that allowed this to happen, and then lean into those skills again. And whether it's building new relationships or leveraging old ones, remember that communication and working with people is probably the biggest soft skill that any of us can have as entrepreneurs. So, long answer to a relatively short question, but I think that that's the one that translates from industry to industry agnostically, is just, being a good person and building relationships.
I love that term, emotional capital. What do you mean by that? I think I know what I mean, but
expound
on that a little bit for me.
So entrepreneurship's not easy, right? It's kind of the hardest thing in the world, right?
Gosh, yeah, absolutely.
It's the hardest thing that anyone's going to do. And so when I say emotional capital, I ask owners, and I say, like, who are you? I want you to think about, before you execute the agreement, when those hard days are coming, which they will, and it'll be micro, macro, it doesn't matter. There's going to be moments of stress. Who are you going to lean on? Think about like who you would send a thank you note. If I gave you 10 pieces of paper today and said, you have to send a thank you note to 10 unexpected people who have helped you in your life. We all have those 10 people. We just don't write the notes. So I encourage people to like think about that and really understand who they have in their corner and how they got that relationship and, build off that and then approach entrepreneurship from that lens. That's kind of how I like to think about it. Like in entrepreneurship in franchising, especially, like there's only two things that matter. And it's, in my opinion, it's franchisor relationships. Like we have to have a strong relationship and the unit economics have to work. If those two things are kind of implicit, we can overcome all the peripherals that will come over time as you're scaling up a business. So we really lean into that relationship side early on so that we all go into this with that kind of directional nautical star.
Yeah. You mentioned when you going back to your story here, you jumped out of the music industry. Everyone thought you went crazy. What'd your wife say? What were those conversations?
She was so supportive. She just saw my spark fading, I think, and she knew that I needed something to focus my energy on. I'm a full blast guy. I've been that way since I was a kid. And I think she saw the routine of it taking a toll on me. And she's like, dude, whatever you want to do, I support. Like I didn't marry you because you were a sound engineer and I could go deep here, but I think she was supportive. And then I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. Once I'd found the industry I wanted to be a part of. And I said, I'm going to spend a few years learning the craft of this industry before I even take a swing at bat. And then, we build this company and this technology here as just a corporate shop. Like one thing that I think is interesting about Sparkle Squad and certain franchises in general is when they're founder led, that means that the leader of the brand is seeing every dollar from $1 to wherever they are today. And I always tell people I have trophies and I have scars from every one of those dollars. And when my franchisees are going through those same kind of processes, I can lean on my trophies or I can lean on my scars and I can draw information really, really quickly. I think it's tremendously valuable to be, founder led as a system. But this really did start with a borrowed car, a bucket, and just a lot of industry information. And that's what this whole thing was built off.
How did that go? I mean, here you are now, and you started with the used car and a bucket of water and soap. How'd you get there? And I mean, there's all sorts of window cleaning options that are out there, right?
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't say it's an overly saturated space, but you're not the first person to think of doing window cleaning, right?
Yeah.
Why, in your estimation, did Sparkle Squad Elite Window Cleaning, why did it blow up? And other companies maybe just do all right and don't have the growth curve that you've seen. What made you all different?
I think a few things. So I think we started it, and I always say we because this is a team sport. Like this is like a team sport. But when it was founded with a incredible cache of information. I had worked 6 years in the industry for some of the biggest companies in the country in the space. I went as far away as Australia and worked for companies in Australia to really get my head around the industry before I even opened the company. So when I opened it, yes, it was a borrowed car and a bucket, but the knowledge that I had at my disposal had a really long tail. And then from day one, I knew that this industry needed better technology and that ladders and squeegees were just not the future of the industry. And I had seen a glimpse of that in my time in Australia. And in the second year of the business, I was still growing it. I was still very much out there as an entrepreneur making things happen. But we had a near miss. So we were using a 40-foot ladder to wash windows 4 stories high, climbing a ladder, which today just seems crazy to me, but that's kind of how the industry is. And I was having a conversation, stabilizing the ladder with the technician, and he slipped off a rung. He caught himself, but he climbed back down. And what I thought was, there is no way to scale this business. because the limiting factor is it's too dangerous. Somebody could get hurt. Like the skill set is when you get into the larger stuff, which is kind of our sweet spot, is those big commercial projects, universities, colleges. I got to figure out the tech. So I started doing assessments of the groundwater in North America, understanding what filters to use to kind of cobble together the systems I'd seen in the UK. And it was really the technology that was the first big differentiator for Elite and subsequently Sparkle Squad. But I say that all to say, if I could retain one thing that allows us to have this crazy growth curve today, and I could only retain one thing in the brand, it wouldn't be the technology. It would be the processes around people. It would be around cultivating people, building technicians. Like we're really, really dialed in on who our frontline avatar is, which is what allows the business to scale. Like there's no consumables in this industry. We sell human labor. And so the more efficient and the more culturally aligned and customer service oriented that labor is, that's actually where the business scales. Although the technology is pretty darn cool. We can go up to 6 stories without leaving the ground and guarantee perfect results. How is I'll give you the short version. Basically,
dumb it down for me, please. Yeah. But I'm thinking like you have me on the edge of my seat there, man. It's like 4 stories. I'm like, oh crap, this dude fall. Like I'm glad everything by the grace of God it all ended up all right, man. But that's I'm curious. Are you using drones? Are you using hot air balloons? Like what are you doing to get up to 6 stories?
I think drone tech's probably on the roadmap in the next 5 years when the technology gets a little bit better than it is today. But what we do is we take the groundwater and we purify it. So if you were to imagine, just right in front of your face, you're to scrub your window with a brush and rinse it off with a hose. So you're going to get water spots all over it. And those water spots aren't actually from the dirt on the window. What they are is it's the minerals in the water as it evaporates off the glass. That's why they're these little crescent moon shapes. And so when the water evaporates, the minerals are left behind and you get spots. So we built a system. It's 4-stage filters. And what it does is it takes whatever the groundwater is from like a mineral composition and takes it to 0 parts per million. And now when we scrub the window and it evaporates off, there's nothing left to leave a spot. And so when we figured out that technology right in front of our face, we can now, by using the exact same methodology, it still works at 60 feet. So we use ultralight carbon fiber poles. We scrub and rinse and it evaporates off and you're left with just like a totally spotless, clear window. And from a safety standpoint, like total game changer, obviously. But I think the part that was allowed for us to have really strong economics as we were scaling was we sell labor, remember? And the time spent climbing up that ladder, climbing down that ladder, moving the ladder, climbing up again, and so on and so forth. Our technicians were now just scrub, rinse, step to the left, scrub, rinse, step to the left. And the efficiency gained in just how we did it allowed us to flat rate our pricing and access a new customer avatar that wasn't getting their windows cleaned before. We were able to be flat rate, really, really fair pricing. And now we had this blue ocean customer that our competitors couldn't service because they were restricted by just the dollars and cents and economics of climbing up and down a ladder all day. So all those stars kind of aligned, and we focused really heavily on customer service so that we could build this retention mechanism that really is how you scale any business, but particularly in home services. Retention is kind of the golden key that allows you to truly scale a juggernaut in any of these spaces.
Yeah, definitely. So you figured out labor. Good for you. I'm not asking you to share your patented process here, but that's especially for window cleaning. I mean, I'd have to imagine. I mean, I've talked to franchisees all the time. They say, "Hey, I just am I'm banging my head against the wall trying to get people to help." But sounds like you solved for that. You said you got a really good idea of front end avatar. Great way to put that. How do you figure that out? How do you attract and retain people to go do the work?
So I am a very, very, this is maybe a controversial take in some people's opinions. I think that this generation coming into the job market right now is the strongest, best employment pool that the world's ever seen. They were born with an iPhone in their pocket, so they can solve problems. They're very autonomous. So we focus on Gen Z. And what does Gen Z want from employment? Well, they get cast as greedy or needy because they want reciprocal value for their time. And so what we do is we build incentives into the business to provide reciprocal value and allow them to play the employment as a game and win at it. And so our technicians will go out at a, whatever arbitrary number, $21 base, but they can do things throughout their day to increase their hourly rate. So they're taking home $30 an hour instead of 20. And this young generation just wants to play that game. So number one is we focus on, enthusiastic young people as the front lines of the business. And we reward them for all the things that the business needs. Anytime an employee does something that solves a need for your business, not table stakes stuff like washing windows, but upselling, getting reviews, getting a neighbor, like all those things should be incentivized heavily so that activity happens. And so that's like focus on young people and then focus on the ability to, because the business scales very naturally, we have the ability to put people in bigger shoes than they're comfortable. So the progression for employees is like very, very obvious to them. Like, oh, this business is going to scale and I want to be a truck leader on the next truck. And so we focus really, really heavily on building people's, I guess, future for the period of time that they're with us. Like, let's be real. My goal is our frontline employees are not going to wash windows for the rest of their lives. Some of them are. Our entire management staff is made up of people that started either in the sales center or on the front lines, which is I'm super, super proud of. But my goal when it comes to frontline employees is we work with them for 3 to 5 years while they're either going through university or they're transitioning in that kind of weird period in their life, early 20s, and they go on and they become doctor or a lawyer or whatever they decide to do. My goal, if I were to be able to summarize it into a sentence, would be in 40 years, I want all my employees to end up at cocktail parties around the country and somebody to say, what was the best job you ever had? And them to say, I washed windows for the period of time when I was going to university or whatever. Nothing will ever top that job. That's our goal. And that's kind of like how we aim to build an amazing workforce.
So you hiring? I'm trying to move to Canada. Fire me up, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're hiring. I think we're hiring in Cincy, actually.
Let's go. Yeah, I got to call my man Mike. It's so funny, man. And it's the relationship building. I coach high school football, and just for a generation that I'm kind of a part of, I'm a tweener between like millennial and Gen Z. So I get both sides of this, but it's such a fractured, like when you got this all the time, we're starved relationally because everything is so transactional. I mean, we're like having a great conversation, but imagine if we were just chilling at a bar, having a beer right now, like there'd be 3 times more energy in that. Right. And so with a generation that is having so much interaction through a screen, I mean, the bar is actually kind of low to make an impact. I mean, when you and I were growing up, now we're sounding crusty. Back in my day, but back in our day, like it wasn't that unique to have face-to-face quality interaction. That's becoming a scarce resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if that's the value differentiator, then then the question becomes, where's the most opportunity? And like you said, there's glass everywhere. Right. So if that's the opportunity, really what you're selling to these employees, because you're always selling employees and you're selling clients. You're as the business owner, you're always doing both of that. And so what you're selling to these employees is that relational, hey, you're going to come have the best job ever. And that's a great differentiator. I'm sure franchisees get fired up about.
They love it. And we teach them how to build culture and build teams and like how to find people that like are ready for, like, find A players that they don't even know it yet. Like sometimes this is like their first real job. They're like 20 years old and they've been working at like random odd jobs. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to take my first like real swing at things. And it's like, endorse that. And the other cool part that the technology ties into is we don't need broad shoulders and brute strength. We're not moving around 40-foot ladders. We have carbon fiber telescopic poles. So our employee avatar doesn't need to be overly masculine and strong. It can be anyone. Actually, our front lines are right about 50-50 male and female, which in the window cleaning industry is really unusual.
That's pretty cool.
It really is, because now when you look at like the hiring pool versus your competitors, it's like, well, if they're using traditional methods, they're cutting off like a humongous swatch of the population that just can't carry a 40-foot ladder.
Yeah.
And so it's like all of a sudden we get to focus on these guys. And I mean, it's a great job. It's outside. You're like, people that get their windows cleaned are usually in beautiful properties, or, you know, you're not spending your days like ditch digging in the bad part of town. So it's yeah, it's cool, man. Employee, like, all this comes back, like what you said earlier about like, what's that thing? And I said, it's like, it's people, it's relationships. It all ties back. Like, this whole business is a relationship business. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's cool. So I know we're running up on time here, but the last question I've got is, you've expanded in Canada, you've expanded to the United States. For a company like yours, franchising is ultimately a growth strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine, as just a single location, you had a decision to make of, I could try to expand through corporate locations. I could try to grow this location to the point where I could sell it at a great multiple. But here you are still in this,
Mm-hmm.
and you're in all across the continent, different cities, and you chose franchising as a way to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
That's a great question. So how we ended up with franchising, do you mind? We're at time. Do you mind if I tell you a little longer?
Please do, man. I'm good for a couple more minutes if you are too.
All right, I am, because this is a cool story. So we built a huge business locally here, corporately, and that drive, I was just like, well, what's next? Like, how do I share this technology with the world? Like, the whole industry deserves to like participate in this. And so, and it was starting to crop up, you know, across the United States, and people just weren't doing it in the same way. And I just wanted to like use the tech and really lean into it. And so, because we had built this big business and because it cash flowed so hard, we were able to make whatever decision we wanted. So we decided, well, franchising makes a lot of sense. Let's build a franchise system and try to see what that's like. But in tandem, let's open corporate stores and see what that's like. And then we'll make our decision based on real feedback. And because we cash flowed this business into the position it was in, we didn't have to take outside, like, we didn't have to bring anybody in. We didn't have to take investment to build the franchise system. So there were no adults in the room. So we got to do it in a way where it was like, if I were the question we asked for the entire year is, if I were the franchisee, what would I want in this scenario? If I were the franchisee, what would I want in this scenario? And, you know, is that pragmatic for scale, blah, blah, blah. And we go through this thing. We build a franchise system off Elite Window Cleaning in Canada. We launch it and we find 4 owners in the first couple months, and they launch, and we see the systems, and it was amazing. And we're like, okay, we understand what that's like. And that's really, really fun. But holy, Kingston's, like, the corporate cash flow is so strong. I wonder what opening corporate stores is like. And so we opened 18 corporate shops in tandem with those 4 owners. And it wasn't as fun. It wasn't like we couldn't be, because geography had placed you have to open corporate stores far away. All of a sudden I didn't have the ability to build the culture that I wanted to build. And it just wasn't as fun, but I could build the culture with my franchise owners who could translate that culture to the front lines. So culturally, the franchise system was more aligned with what I wanted it to be. And then COVID hit, and I was sitting in this chair in 2019, and I had to make a decision. I didn't know, it was March. I didn't know, it was March of 2020. I didn't know what was coming down the pipe. None of us did, right? Like, it was like, is home services, is window cleaning just gone now? Like, what,
right.
None of us knew. And in that moment, we went around the leadership team. We're like, hey, we got to roll up all the corporate so we can put those resources into making sure our franchise owners get across whatever this is going to be. And in that moment, it was so clear what the people we cared about and what we cared about, that franchising just became the direction. And not a single person on the team ever has looked back once. Nice. And then, COVID turned out to be very, very positive, obviously a huge negative thing, economically very positive for our business, and allowed our owners just to have incredible scale. And the rest has been history. It's doing what you love to do, right? Like, we get to do the fun one. We chose the fun one.
That's amazing, man. That's good. It's dollars and cents, but ultimately it's cool to hear, hey, this is kind of who we are, and the origin story of a franchise. I tell people all the time, when you're buying into a franchise, you're buying in to be an extension of the story of the brand, right? These brands have stories, and they have an origin story. They started off as Chris saying, I'm kind of tired of the music industry. I want to go start washing windows. Is that a story that you want to be a part of? If you're drawn to that story, yeah. And I've had clients who talk to you, and I have update calls with them. They're like, man, this is something I want to be a part of. So I appreciate you sharing your story. As we wrap up here, man, I'm going to just present you with a soapbox. What didn't I ask? What's it could be anything, right? But if is there anything, like, while you got the mic and the whatever limited spotlight I can provide to you, but that spotlight's on you. And any parting shots?
I think like the big thing I would say is, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I actually see myself as one of those people that wants a vessel for their effort. This industry has been so rewarding for being that vessel to me. And anybody listening to this who's not relating to Sparkle Squad, I hope that you can relate to the fact that people are what make this whole thing work for any entrepreneurial endeavor. Take that notion of this is a people business, and find out where you can best leverage your people skills in entrepreneurship. And, if you're stoked on Sparkle, reach out to Brady, and I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in what they just heard.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, it's not every day that I get to talk to someone who's produced music for AC/DC. That's pretty sweet. It's not every day I get to talk with someone who's built a multinational company, and you've got a pretty sweet Canadian accent. Just wanted to throw that in there, man. I mean, it's top notch, man. I'm not even gonna try. I'm a just good old Midwestern guy, about as white bread as it comes. But I mean, it's dominant.
I appreciate that. It's all our U.S. owners have a good rib at that all the time.
I'm sure they do.
Thanks so much for having me today, dude.
Oh, yeah, man. This is fun. We'll have to do this again. There's a lot of things that you said in there that I'm like, man, this what I said before, just off stage. We were like, hey, I'm no Joe Rogan. I try to keep it flowing, but I'm man, we could do a Rogan style, like 3-hour type deal with some of the things that you're saying. There's so many just different rabbit holes I want to climb down. So we'll have to loop back and do this again, man.
I'd be happy to, dude. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. See you, Chris.
See ya.